So in the last session, we completed up to PPR, payment process request. It's all about processing the payments automatically by selecting the invoices. So now we'll see prepayment invoice process. So it's all about, we know it's all about giving the advance to supplier. Depending on scenarios, it could be advance to employee also. So when we talk about prepayment invoice process, we know very well just whatever the process we follow in case of EBS, the same in terms of the functional how it works, so everything remains same. We'll see how. Just to understand this prepayment invoice, we'll go with a simple case. So I will first create prepayment invoice. So we'll create prepayment invoice with say $25,000. So to make the advance, to process the advance to supplier, it's a mandatory we should have a invoice. So that is the reason first we have to create the invoice for prepayment purpose. Then we can make the payment as a prepayment amount, advance amount. Say create payment for the same amount. We know we never give partial payment against the prepayment. How much amount we are going to give, accordingly we create the prepayment invoice. The same will process as a payment, right? So will process so that $25,000 would be available to utilize on future purchases. So we'll create the standard invoice. You may create with the 5,000 or 10 or maybe 25,000, however you require, you can create it. Say we'll create for just 10,000. So since we are going to create and do process the payment for entire prepayment amount 25,000 would be available as a advance with the supplier. So out of that we can apply 10,000 on this open invoice. Say apply prepayment on standard invoice. How much we are going to apply? 10,000. So remaining you could see 15,000 as available. In future again when you have invoice that we can apply on that. And when we deal with this prepayment invoice in EBS, by default, when you have this scenario, say you created prepayment and you process the payment, and the moment you try to create the standard invoice, system will give you a prompt saying that there is prepayment available against the supplier. If you want to use, this is a process you have to follow to apply. So that sort of notification we get in case of EBS. In the Fusion, that whether you want to see some notification from the system or you want system to ignore the notification, giving the notification to the user, you can decide by setting option in the invoice options. Okay, so to get a prompt, the notification from the system as prepayment is available, if it is available, we have to set prepayment option in invoice options. Okay, so before we just go and do test this case with this here, we'll just we'll see the setup. Set prepayment option in invoice options. Any question? Noise, background noise. Pradeep. Yep. So first we have to set the option in the invoice option saying that yes, we need a notification from the system if prepayment is available against any supplier at the time of that message system has to show when you create the standard invoice. Okay, so first we'll go and set up this option, then we'll proceed with this simple case. Okay, the rest everything remain as it is as a EBS. Fine. First go to invoice options. So go to project. So search for the task called as invoice options. Just open this project and search for task called as invoice options. Okay, go to invoice options. So here we could see all the controls and defaults for our business unit which supports invoice process. Fine. So here we have a prepayment section within the invoice options. So when you create the prepayment, which payment method you want to set as a default? We know very well that we have to use the payment terms as immediate only in case of prepayment. So here you can specify. So show available prepayments during invoice entry. If you set show available prepayments during invoice entry, then only system will display as a prepayment is available against the supplier. Otherwise, we cannot come to know until unless we go and run the prepayment status report. Enable this checkbox so that system will show the details how many prepayments are available, how much amount is available within those prepayment invoices. We can see that. Okay. So just enable the checkbox. Now we can proceed with the process of creating, processing the payment, creating the standard invoice, applying the prepayment, and that before applying we can just come to know how much advance available with the supplier. So now we can go to invoice workbench, go to navigator and just select task called as invoices. Go to task list, say create invoice. So as we discussed, we'll create the invoice, okay, the prepayment invoice with $25,000. Fine. So system is defaulting the BU name because of the profile option which we set. So now select supplier. Supplier is Cloud ANC supplier 1. And here you can enter the invoice number. I'll say PP1, prepayment 1. And you can just enter the amount as $25,000. And here we have a type called as prepayment. Select it. And basically we know when we deal with this prepayment, we by default system select the prepayment type as a temporary, which can be applied on future purchases. The other option we have as a permanent, which cannot be applied on any open invoice. Here also we have the same option. We'll go through it. Okay, fine. So select type as a prepayment. Now you can enter the line amount. So make sure that payment terms are immediate. That rule we know anyway. So it's a $25,000. So system is deriving the prepayment account from common options. Okay. So from common option system is taking the prepayment account. If you provide supplier site level, the same system will derive here. From there it will take here automatically. Done. Now go to show more. So here you could see the checkbox called as allow prepayment application. In case of EBS, we see this option in the invoice header level. In the invoice header level, so the prepayment type, you can see one column, and within that you can see only just two values. One is temporary and permanent. Instead of giving in the same way here, just they given through checkbox. If you enable, okay, allow prepayment application, you have to treat this prepayment type as temporary. If you disable the checkbox, system will understand this prepayment is permanent, which you cannot apply on any other open invoice for adjustment or settlement purpose. Okay, so by default, allow prepayment application. That means it's a temporary prepayment. Just notice that. And here you can specify after. You can just, it's all about so after application. I mean apply after. So after, on or after this date only, we can apply this prepayment on any invoice. Okay, done. So now you can validate this invoice. Okay, when you compare with EBS, you don't find any difference. In case of EBS, you don't need to set any control to get a pop-up about the prepayment availability, but here intentionally you have to go and set, then only you can see, otherwise no message from the system. The rest remains same, okay, as it is. So we validated that invoice. After validation, invoice status is unpaid. Now we'll go and make the payment. Say pay in full. Select payment process profile, Cloud INC, and payment document. Check. Submit. Just say OK. Now the validation status is available. Okay, through this invoice prepayment, what are the amount we processed, that is available to use, okay, in future. Say save and close, or else we may click on save and create next to create one more invoice, that is standard invoice. Okay, we created prepayment invoice with the 25,000 for the same amount we processed payment. Now we'll create the standard invoice. Go to task list, say create invoice. If not from here, so simply you can just click on this recent invoices. It will show that a new invoice, or the same invoice we created, this PP1. Okay, and here you could see the option called as create also. You can just go to the task list to create the new invoice by selecting the task. Otherwise the same task related function they're given as a tab. You may click on create to create the new invoice. Fine. Our supplier is Cloud INC supplier 1. Okay. Say invoice number 1 is $10,000. And the amount is 10,000. Validate this invoice. So after validating this invoice, here system is showing that bell icon, notification icon, which talks about prepayment availability. Okay, so supplier number, against that it is showing, against this supplier there is one prepayment available with the 25,000 USD. So because we enable the checkbox in invoice options, that is the reason system is showing this information here, otherwise it won't show. Fine. So validate it, and you can apply the prepayment on this invoice. Go to invoice actions, same process. How we do in EBS, we go to the invoice actions, and there we have option called as apply or unapply prepayment. Same process. Just select this option. So here you could see the prepayment, how many prepayments are available. Only one is available. You can just select it. Select prepayment record. So availability is 25. To apply, how much we are going to apply. 10,000 based on the invoice amount system is automatically selecting, or else out of 25 you want to apply only 5,000. Yes, you can do that. Only 5,000 you want to apply. Remaining 5 you may process as a payment again. That depends how you want to do it. You can go ahead. So 10,000, just select this record and say apply. Now the availability would be only 15,000 after application. So only 15,000 prepayment is available from this PP1 invoice, prepayment invoice. Now you can say done. Now you could see this invoice status as paid. The payment status for this invoice is paid, and since we did the application, we have to submit again it for validation purpose. Right, it's validated, status is paid. So this is how just we can process the prepayment. Like in EBS case, if you want to see the status of the prepayment and if you want to know the details, we have a prepayment status report. The same you could see here. By running that, you can get the detailed information about the prepayment. So that's all about prepayment. Only we have to set that option to see that availability at the time of invoice creation. Rest of processes creating under processing payment, creating standard invoice, applying the prepayment. Done. And the next concept is withholding tax. Okay, we'll see withholding tax configuration, and after completing the configuration setups, we will test by creating the
Lakshman.
Yeah, please.
Hello, Lakshman. Can we have the accounting of prepayment?
Yes, for everything we can have accounting.
Can you show it?
You know EBS, right?
Yes.
EBS, do you have accounting?
Yes.
From where it will take accounting entries for prepayment? Source.
From header point, there is some link is populating, and we will click on that. Create accounting.
Debit and credits from where system derive in case of EBS? Fine. So debit account is prepayment account. System always derive from the supplier side. The credit account is liability account, that also system derives from supplier side. Only in case of prepayment only the debit line and credit line system derives from the supplier side in EBS. Because in EBS supplier side level these two accounts are mandatory accounts, and in Fusion these two are not mandatory. So if you provide in the supplier side level these two accounts, it will take debit and credit lines both from the supplier side. If not available at supplier side, it derives from the common options. So if you want to see the accounting, you submit this for accounting. Same, there is no difference in that. Prepayment account is debit, prepayment expense account is debit, and liability is credit. Here you could see 15015 is prepayment
bank account.
Prepayment account, not bank. Prepayment account, and this is a liability account, accounts payable account. These two accounts were given in the common options. So this is normal in case of EBS. These two will get defaulted to supplier side. Since in the EBS case, these two accounts they made as a mandatory at supplier side level, and Fusion they made it as optional because of several reasons, centralized procurement and other reasons. So if you enter through manually, the same it will derive for the invoice creation. Otherwise, directly it takes from common options. Now in the current scenario, it is taken from common options. We didn't provide these accounts at supplier site level since these are optional. Okay, that
Where's the bank account?
from where system derives what accounting it creates, it remains same. We never find the difference in that, in this Fusion compared to EBS. Yeah, please, since there's some
Where's
question.
the bank account?
Sorry, bank account, when you make the payment, we have to go to the payment record.
Can you show that in invoice screen and
Invoice screen, how
payment?
you can see that
Remit to bank account.
payment screen.
Remit to bank account.
Yeah, that's what you have to go to payment record. See, if you want to see the bank account, which bank account you want to see?
Supplier.
Sorry,
Supplier.
supplier bank account. Do you use
Yes.
supplier bank account in check payment? No. If you are going to process
invoice.
electronic wire, then you can use the supplier bank account. Right? We are using the check as a payment method. Here you don't see any supplier bank. If you are
Here the
processing
feed.
the electronic or wire payment, so here you can see the supplier site level. You will be just associating that bank account information, then it will show here. From where you can see, you can just go to manage installments. From there, from supplier site, it will default to every invoice which you create, and here you could see bank account.
Okay.
Yeah. Done. So when we were asking for show bank account, I was thinking it's our bank account which we use it for payment. Fine, just it's okay, got you. Done. So we'll see the withholding tax configuration process. So this is also when you compare with EBS setups, everything's remaining same, but just slightly they change the naming convention when you do the setups. That will come to know now. Okay, we'll do the required configuration. Just which is required in the system environment to identify the tax is applicable or not for that supplier, and it will calculate and it will be creating the separate invoice with the tax amount based on the applicability. Okay, first we'll go and see the setups which are required to implement the withholding tax solution in the system. First, create withholding tax authority as a supplier. Right, once you deduct the tax amount when you make the payment to your supplier for whom withholding tax is applicable, we have to pay to the tax authority. If you want to make the payment to anyone, we have to create them as a supplier in the system. So we have to create the tax authority as a supplier in the system. We know in EBS we create special calendar. We create special calendar in EBS for the purpose of withholding tax, payment terms, and recurring invoice, as well as key indicators. For these purposes, normally we use special calendar. When I talk about withholding tax, special calendar is not mandatory depending on the scenario, which rate structure you selected as a part of tax rate definition it required. But here, just to understand, we'll go and create the same special calendar. So if required, we can use or else you can ignore. It's optional, basically normal as per standard process optional. But for our understanding, we'll go and create it. Okay. So in EBS case, when you implement withholding tax, you may create special calendar. So the same special calendar in EBS payables, what are the special calendar we have? In Fusion, we are calling as just payables calendar. Here the naming convention they changed. Here the special calendar we call as payables calendar. Say create payables calendar. Okay, we'll see that. So after that, when you compare the setups, in case of EBS, in payables options, you can find one tab called as withholding tax. In EBS release 12, you just find one tab called as withholding tax tab within the payables options. Under that, you have to go and enable withholding tax is required and do other specification at what point of time system has to trigger the tax calculation, at what point of time system has to trigger withholding tax invoice creation. These specifications we have to set up within the invoice options. Okay, equal to invoice, sorry, payables options. Equal to payables options. In Fusion, we have invoice and payment options. But the withholding tax configuration, they separated from the invoice as invoice options in Fusion. So for that, we have to perform the separate task. Say, set up withholding tax options. Okay, so we have a separate options for tax withholding and other tax, including other taxes and withholding. We have a separate task. Through this task only you can go and set the any controls or defaults which will be applicable for withholding tax calculation. We'll see that. First we'll see the list of setups. So once we're done with that, you can go and create the tax codes. So create tax codes. So when you create the tax code, the same tax codes will be mapping with respect to tax authority. And here we have to create the tax regime also. We'll see that at the time of definition. We'll go through those points. And to group these tax codes, we have to create the tax group in case of EBS. But the tax group here, the naming convention, they named it as tax classification. Classification is nothing but so classifying and maintaining as a groups only. But naming convention EBS, we have a tax groups. The same tax groups you could see in the Fusion as a tax classification. So nothing but tax group only if you compare with EBS. Create tax classification or classifications. It's nothing but tax group. To group multiple taxes or multiple tax codes, we need tax group. So at the time of definition, they're given as a tax classification in the supplier level, and in the different levels, they're given as a, again tax group only. Okay, so they didn't take the same naming convention wherever this is applicable. Definition time they're given as a tax classification. Supplier level, instead of giving as a tax classification, they given as a tax group only. Okay, so we'll see that. So once we're done with these setups, we have to assign the tax is applicable for which supplier through group only, tax group only. Fine. Say assign tax group to our standard supplier. For which supplier withholding tax is applicable, for that supplier we have to assign the tax group. Done. So these are the basic configuration we have to complete. Once we're done with this configuration, what we'll do is we'll go and create the invoice. So create standard invoice and validate it. Then system will create withholding tax invoice with the tax amount. The moment you validate, system creates withholding tax invoice with tax amount. That by taking the tax amount, it will create the withholding tax invoice. This we don't need to write here. It will create the withholding tax invoice against the tax authority. The standard invoice would be against our standard supplier, and the withholding tax invoice system will create against the tax authority. At what point of time system will create the withholding tax invoice, that totally depends on which option, how you set the options. Whether you want to calculate and create the withholding tax invoice at the time of validation or payment, that totally depends. Okay, how you are setting here. What you set accordingly, it will create based on that event. Based on that event, it will trigger and it will create. Okay, now we'll go and see these setups and process. First, we'll go and create the withholding tax authority as a supplier. Go to supplier definition page. We know how to create the supplier. Again, we don't need to discuss detail level. Quickly, we'll create the supplier, and the additional option which you have to set to for system understanding to understand the supplier as a tax authority. We'll see that. So say create supplier, create supplier. We'll give the name as Cloud INC Withholding Tax Authority. Cloud INC Withholding Tax Authority. And business relationship should be spent authorized to record any transactions. So tax organization type, any value you can select. It is just information only, it doesn't have any functionality behind it. So select any one of the option. Otherwise here you may select as a tax organization, government agency, or anything, any value select should be relevant. Say create. Okay, done. If you want to set the defaults, you may set certain defaults at profile level, maybe payment method and other information. If you want to set, you can select it. Say select and say default, and just say save it and go to addresses. Say create address name, cloud inc withholding tax address. Just we are testing, so we can provide any dummy address, right? There won't be any issue with the information. So country is US. So what purpose this withholding tax authority has this address? Always to receive the payments only, right? So select address purpose as a remit to, nothing but payment purpose. We use this address for payment purpose only. So provide address details. Select any one of the postal code. Rest of information system would default, right? Done. So address level also you may set default payment method, so that this would get defaulted to site definition. If you set here, select check, or any payment method we can set as how we process, but here it's just we are selecting check. Done. Now you can say save and close, and we'll go and create the site against this address. Just we're done with the address definition. Now you can go to sites. Go to sites. We are trying to create the site from Cloud INC, who is employee and procurement agent. That is the reason this function you could see as enabled. Now click on create. So if you want to create the site is against which address? Select address first. The same address name system will take as a site name. We have to, so you may override based on how you want to see the site name. Withholding tax site 1. So system is defaulting the site purpose as a pay from address. That is fine for us. Now if you want to set these options, the relevant options based on the process, or as a very basic information, after providing all the details we have to save this record, then it will enable these tabs to set the relevant information. Done. So since the site purpose is not related to purchasing, it is not enabling this purchasing and receiving tabs. So go to invoicing tab and set default invoice currency and payment currency. Okay. So if you set here invoice currency, based on that only system can create withholding tax invoice in that currency. Select payment currency. Or you can go to payments tab to verify the default payment method is system is taking from the address or not. This is the address. This address level we set default payment method check. Yes, system is defaulting to site. Fine. Then go to site assignments to assign the site to business unit. So simply you can click on auto create assignment. Auto create assignment. It will just automatically system will assign that site to specific BU, for which BU this procurement agent is acting as, I mean, this user is acting as a procurement agent. So that we have only for one. The system is defaulted, and you can say save and close. Now, how system will understand this supplier as tax authority? Okay, to set that information, just let me save it before going to the profile page. Go to profile. So within the profile, we have a supplier type field. Here we have to select the supplier as a tax authority. Tax authority, then only the supplier would be available in tax configuration process. Okay, only this specification makes the difference. Okay, the site purpose we select only payment because we never deal with the tax authority for any purchases. And here supplier type you should select as a tax authority, otherwise system will treat the supplier as a normal supplier. This supplier definition won't be available in the tax configuration to map the tax code with the tax authority. Done. Says submit. Fine. So done. So now what is the next step? We have to create the payables calendar. Okay. So we'll just go on to create the payables calendar. Go to implementation project. Click on task list. Click on overview to navigate to our project. So EBS special calendar, here they named it as a payables calendar. Since we use that calendar within the payables, maybe it's for special purpose, they just name it as a payables calendar. Fine. Search for payables calendar. Okay, manage payables calendars. Click on go to task icon. Click on create. So what are the different purposes we create special calendar in EBS? We create special calendar for the purpose of payment terms, withholding tax, recurring invoice, and key indicators. Those are the four purposes why we create special calendar in EBS. But here you don't see those four options. But how it works, we'll see that. Cloud INC, what purpose? Withholding tax purpose. So the same I'm writing as a name. So calendar type. This will decide where you want to use this payables calendar. If you want to use this payables calendar for the purpose of just payment terms, you can just accept the default value which system is taking. Other than payment terms, it could be for the purpose of withholding tax or recurring invoice or key indicators. You have to select calendar type as general purpose. So if you select for payment terms, this special calendar, this payables calendar can be used only in to select in the payment terms, which will create the schedules as per this calendar periods. So other than payables payment terms, if any other purpose you want to use this calendar, it could be recurring, withholding, or key indicators, select the purpose as a general, calendar type as a general purpose. So this payables calendar also you can create automatically, the periods we can create automatically, how we created periods for accounting calendar. The period frequency we require monthly. Since it's a monthly 12 periods, we know no adjusting periods are applicable in case of this. other calendars other than accounting calendar, right? So start date. What should be the start date for this payables calendar? So the 1st John 2018, and the period name format how we required. So once you give the specifications, you can click on save. And so save and close. One second, I think we should click on generate. Basically, yeah, we have a tab called a generate. Directly, you can click on the generate tab. Again from date to date. No, 1 second. First, you have to click on generate. Without generating, we just saved it. No issues. We'll do that. Fine. Let's write the name as withholding tax. Withholding tax. Calendar type is general purpose. You can go with the start date as a 1st John. Now you can say generate periods within this payables calendar. Click on generate periods. Periods are generated. Now you can say save and close. Okay, done. 1 second. Okay, we just done with the payables calendar. Supplier, we created tax authority as supplier. Payables calendar, yes. Now we have to go and set up withholding tax options. Okay, so just go to project, search for withholding tax. So here is the task called as manage tax reporting and withholding tax options. Go to this task. Fine. So this is the task name, manage tax reporting and withholding tax options. Just click on go to task icon. Okay. System is defaulting the business unit. Rest of most of the options also defaulted. Now we have to select event class when system has to calculate and apply the tax. So select standard invoice. So apply withholding and process transaction taxes, allow manual withholding. Basically, these are all options we could see in payables options in case of EBS. These setups completely they move to the separate task called as manage tax reporting and withholding tax options. Here you can specify the calculation point and the invoice creation point. So invoice you can select as invoice is also as a invoice. That means when you say invoice, system will understand as a validation time. But in case of EBS, you could say at the time of validation. Okay, that's separate options they're given. Here just they're given the its option as a what like say invoice calculation point and tax invoice creation point. It's nothing but uh, withholding tax invoice creation that you can specify. And here by default you could see the same options. You can just normal practice would be invoice creation time only we calculate the tax. So from when this should be applicable that you can specify. Say from today this should be applicable. And these are the specifications. Just you have to select event class and have to specify the start date. Then system will start using this setup for the relevant process. You can say save and close. Only the difference is the same setup we do in case of EBS and the payables options, but in the Fusion we have they given the same setup as a separate task. The rest of controls and all same as it is you could see here. Okay, done. The next task is we have to create the tax codes. Go to implementation project and search for tax codes. So manage tax codes. So manage tax codes. Just click on, go to task icon. Say create. We know very well how to create these tax codes in case of EBS for the purpose of withholding tax. The same definition if we compare with the Fusion, within the Fusion, this is slightly different. You can see that here they just map these tax codes with the tax regime also. Okay, we'll see how it works. Select business unit. We want to create this tax code for which business unit. So Cloud INC US business unit. Select country. Search for US. Select value and say OK. And tax regime code. We have to create the tax regime for this withholding tax purpose. So click on LOV and say create. Since this is a vision environment, you could see some definitions already available, but we have to create our own tax regime for withholding tax also. So may be applicable, may not be applicable. They made it as a mandatory, this definition for tax code definition. So here we could give the name as Cloud INC withholding tax regime. And start date you can take as a today's date. Say save and close. So we create a tax code. Now we have to create the tax. We have to define the tax. So go to tax field and say create. So tax name we have to provide. Say withholding tax at the rate of say 15%. Just name we are giving as withholding tax at 15%, and start date today, and provide tax liability account. Select company. It's not responding. Yep. So select company, department, and do withholding tax account. Department. Select withholding tax account. So if it is available within this value set, you can pick that value, or else you can select any one of the random value. Reality here, we should select the withholding tax account. We'll search for withholding. Search. Okay, we have a withholding tax account. So let's select it. Say okay. Okay, so we just given the name and account also we provided. Now we have to map this tax code with the tax authority. So we create a tax authority called as Cloud INC Withholding Tax Authority, and we mark the supplier type as a tax authority. Because of that reason, that supplier would be available in this LO. So select tax authority as a Cloud INC Withholding Tax Authority. Site, anyway, just we have only one site for this tax authority. The same you can select here. And say save and close. It's all about creating the tax code and mapping the tax code with the tax authority. And we have to set the rate for this tax code. Just we written the just name only. So just say save and close. And in EBS, when you create the tax code, we have one checkbox called as create tax group automatically. If you accept that create tax group automatically, system creates tax code as a group automatically, right? So here tax group we are calling as a tax classification code. Okay, so here you can see the same option, create tax classification code. If you enable it, this code itself system will create as a tax classification, nothing but group. Fine. So tax rate code, the same tax name only you may take as a tax rate code, and what base it has to calculate, percentage base. And here you can go to rate period. If you go with the threshold controls and all, so here you can specify your tax calendar, withholding tax calendar which we created, but then normally that we don't use that practice. So go with the rate period. So you can specify the rate for this tax code. Within the tax name itself you written as a 15%. Yes, the same will follow here also. So then system is defaulting the tax liability account from the tax where we specified the rest of information. Just specify the start date for the this tax rate applicability. Select it. Okay, you don't need to select create tax classification code. If you select it, automatically system will create the tax classification code against this code. Okay, so we don't need to create, but we'll go and create and we'll see that. So save and close. The next step is you may have a multiple taxes. In that case, definitely tax grouping is required. The same we are calling as tax classification. Even if you don't have multiple taxes also, it's a mandatory you have to create the tax classification. Without tax classification, you cannot associate any tax with the supplier. Tax code we created, now we'll go and create the tax classification. Done. Just click on done. So here is the task called as manage withholding tax classifications. This is equal to tax group. Just click on create. Tax classification code. Cloud INC, or else say Cloud INC withholding tax group. Here we can group one or multiple tax codes, right? So select start date for this group and just add our BU under tax rate code, etc. Just click on add. It's all about grouping the tax codes. Select our business unit. So Cloud INC US business unit. We have only one tax rate code. The same you can select here. Withholding tax at 15%. This is what we given. Okay, this is the tax name, and this is the tax regime we created. So then these are the specifications we have to give. Then say save and close. If you have multiple taxes, you may add here one by one within this group, right? So the next task is we have to assign this tax group or tax classification to standard supplier. For which supplier this withholding tax is applicable, we have to assign to that supplier. We'll go to our Cloud INC supplier 1. Go to supplier definition page and find our standard supplier and associate and enable withholding tax for the supplier and assign this tax group to supplier. Go to supplier definition page. So under procurement, we have a task called as suppliers. This task we are getting for this user because we assigned suppliers manager role to this user, right? Go to task list, click on manage suppliers to search and find the suppliers. So our supplier name is Cloud INC supplier 1. Right, Cloud INC supplier 1. You can select this record and you can click on edit, or else directly you can click on the supplier name. So now you can select edit mode. Fine. Now we are at profile level. The profile level. So here we have a tabs. Go to income tax tab. Under that you have a checkbox called as use withholding tax. Enable it. And withholding tax group. We didn't create any group, right? We created classification. The classification only we call as a group. So select that classification here. Cloud INC withholding group. This is the name we given. Select it. So at what level we are setting this? Profile level. If you set profile level, then only system will allow us to set site assignment level. So after completing this, save it. Now you can go to sites and click on edit. Go to site assignments. And here system will allow you to enable use withholding tax because profile level will be enabled, otherwise we cannot enable here. Assignment level, enable use withholding tax for this site and associate the tax group to this site. Cloud INC withholding tax group. And say save and close. Say submit. Done. If you compare with EBS, same setups as it is we are doing. Just naming convention is different when you are creating tax codes. Additionally, we are creating the tax regimes and we are mapping the tax code with the groups. And codes we are mapping with the tax regimes. And instead of calling as tax group, we are calling as tax classification. Rest remains same setups. Withholding tax options, we have a separate task in case of EBS. The withholding tax configuration you could see in the payable options. Fine. Now we'll go and create the standard invoice against our Cloud INC supplier 1. For Cloud INC supplier 1, we applied withholding tax configuration. Right. Now system will calculate the tax. Go to invoice workbench. Invoices. Go to task list. Say create invoice. Select supplier. Just say okay. Fine. So enter line amount. Say 10,000 or say 1 lakh. So done. And of course, the header level we have to enter the amount. So it's invoice number and 1 lakh. Done. Now just submit this invoice for validation. Now automatically system will trigger withholding tax calculation since we associated withholding tax group to this supplier site, right? So you can notice below, if you scroll down, you can see in totals. The total amount is 1 lakh. So 85,000 is due to standard supplier. It is we are due to pay to the supplier. Rest of 15%, nothing but out of 1 lakh 15,000 withholding. We are holding to pay to the tax authority. So now just you can pay only 85,000 to this standard supplier. Rest will be paying to the tax authority. So we can go and find the invoice with the tax authority supplier with $15,000. Just to see that invoice, we don't need to pay. Just as a process, just we are doing it. You can just make the payment for this 85,000. For rest of 15,000, you can see the withholding tax invoice against the tax authority. So save and close. And here just verify. Go to recent. It's not reflecting in this list. You can find from here. Manage invoices. Supplier name. Select tax authority. Say search. You can see system created withholding tax invoice against Cloud INC withholding tax authority. Amount is 15,000. Invoice type is withholding tax. So you may just open this to validate and account undo to make the payment to tax authority. So if you want to perform any actions on this invoice, you have to go to actions, say edit. Now you can perform validation. You can do before just selecting edit also. You can say validate. Here you could see the description withholding tax against cloud supplier IMC against this invoice number of standard. This is standard invoice. This you can pay to tax authority. Invoice type is withholding tax. So done. So we created and system created withholding tax invoice. Sorry.
Lakshman, the tax invoice number created, did I miss any setup or this?
No, automatically it creates. Automatically it creates.
Okay, so there is no requirement to set up a sequence or something
No,
like
no,
this.
because it's not like manual entry kind of thing, right? So it's a system generated means it can go with any number. So we don't have any option for that to set up. Fine. So that's all about withholding tax configuration process. Now we'll look at bills payable configuration and the process. Okay, we don't have much setups, many setups for this bills payables. We know it's all about processing future dated payment. So PDC, post dated checks. If when you are issuing the PDC to supplier, we will use this bills payables functionality. So to implement this solution, what setups we have to do? So we have to make sure that the payment method level we enabled the bills payables function, so that system will prompt us to enter the maturity date for the check, the payment time. We'll see that. Say bills payables. So first what we have to do is we can use existing payment method, or else we can create the new payment method. Okay, better we can go and create the separate payment method. For that method will enable bills payables as required. Okay, say create payment method for bills payable. Okay, and so once we're done with this, whenever you just process the payment, like system has to derive the bills payable account. Okay, so in the process of this future dated payment, system required bills payable till it get processed the actual payment, the amount should be held by bills payable account. For that reason we have to specify the bills payables account in the common options. Say so select or say provide bills payable account in common options. So once we're done with this, these are the setups, basic setups for this. Then we'll create standard invoice by selecting the bills payables payment method, and we'll create the payment by selecting maturity date. That's all. We'll see that process. First we'll go and create the payment method. Go to implementation project. So setup and maintenance. Manage implementation project. So always do the setups from the project only. Don't go with that other page which allows you to do the same setups. Fine. Search for the task called as payment methods. So manage payment methods. Click on go to task icon. Say create. Say cloud inc. Check the two with the bills option. Fine. Here primarily the rest of all options you can accept defaults or else you may change as per requirement, but not that much mandatory. Go to bills payables tab to address this can be used for bills payables process. So use payment method to issue the bills payable. So this is what you can do, or else for any one of the existing payment method also you find out in the same page and you can enable it. So that's how we have to create the bills payable account, a bills payable payment method. Now go to common options to provide bills payable account. Okay, just go to common options as a part of our project. We have a task called as manage common options for payables and procurement, right? So search for common options. So manage common options for payables and procurement. If the bills payable account is not provided within these common options, you have to provide it. Since the account is optional, I think we didn't enter. So that is optional account. Since we are using the bills payable, so it will become mandatory, right? So the account we didn't provide. Sorry. So copy and paste any one of the code combination and just change the account. Select bills payable account. So search with the any term bills are payable. Say bills. Oh, sorry. Here I thought like advanced we selected. Yep, we have bills payable. Select it. Say okay. Done. So these are the two setups you have to consider when you implement bills payable. Now we'll go and create the standard invoice. Go to invoices task. Say create invoice. And withholding tax is applicable, right? So for every invoice, again, system will start calculating withholding tax. Instead of calculating, just one time we'll go and disable it, so that even we can proceed when issue, but we tested not required now. All the time the tax calculation will go and disable it. So first disable at profile level, sorry, site level. So in reverse way we have to do these setups. At the time of enabling, we enabled at profile then site. Now we have to undo that. So go to sites first. First remove code group, then disable it. So save and close. Now we can do the same at profile level. So from now, for this supplier, withholding tax is not applicable. And we'll do one more thing. What we'll do is whenever you create invoice, so we are just searching for Cloud INC. When you search for Cloud INC, system will display those two names, two suppliers. So what we'll do is we'll change the withholding tax authority name now, so that whenever you search for Cloud INC, system won't display these two directly. The first one it will be selected. So in the search criteria it will be matching. That is the reason. Just you may change the name since it's a test environment. Any name you can provide. Done. Fine. Now we'll go and create the invoice. Say create invoice. Cloud INC.
Lakshman, this is Srini here.
Yeah, please.
Sorry to ask you this question. Maybe I frankly I don't know
Yeah, we
where
have
exactly
yeah, please.
bills payable will be used for the supplier. In the even in the EBS too. Maybe I don't know. Maybe everybody
Yeah,
knows, but
yeah,
I don't
see,
know.
it's all
Can you
about
tell me?
no. See, it's bills payables. Yes, it's used in payables in the process of giving the payment, and we have a bills concept, separate concept which you can use in the receivables also when you get the bill from your customer. That's a, again separate process.
Meaning the bills payable, we are do the supplier is
Yeah,
paying
bill
bills on
payable.
behalf of another site or another
No, no, no.
supplier.
No. Simple. It's very simple. Here, bills payables means what we have to understand is when you give the future dated check for your supplier to manage that scenario, you use future functionality called as bills payable. That's all. See, normally you issue the check. You issued check today. Supplier can
Okay.
encash it, right? He can deposit
Yes.
and that can be cleared. Okay. Say for example, you have to make the payment today. You don't have funds. What is the technique you can use? You can issue the check today. That means you are paying, but it will be mentioning future date on the check. Maybe this check will be issued by end of this month. You are making the payment today. Till end of this month, the supplier cannot get the payment out of it.
So it's similar to post-dated check.
Yep, that's similar. Not post-dated check only. That point only I included discuss again just now. Also, I was talking about it. PDC. post-dated check.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
To issue the PDC post-dated check, okay, what process we follow in the business, the same we can implement in the system by using the bills payable. That's all. Okay, fine. So in EBS, in 11i we were not calling it as a bills payable. They given as a future dated payments only. From release 12, they named it as a bills payable. The same we are continuing in the fusion also with the same term. Fine. So here you can enter any amount, say $1,000. So line amount $1,000. Now how you are going to make the payment for this invoice? Okay, just save it. Okay. You can go to invoice actions and go to manage installments. So what are the payment method we set as a default at supplier site level, that would get defaulted. What we set at a payment supplier site level, check. But now we just made a plan of giving this payment using the future dated check. So accordingly you have to specify the payment method. You can override cloud INC check bills. The rest of process remains same, validate and account it. The normal payment, and you're making the payment, just very basic information we provide. But in case of bills payables, you should specify the check maturity date as a mandatory. Otherwise, you cannot process the payment. That maturity date only will be printed on the check. Fine, just we're done with that. So we created invoice, and now we'll go to the payment workbench. So create payment. Our supplier is Cloud INC. And bank account is Cloud INC corporate account. And payment method, not check, right? It's a Cloud INC check bills. The moment you select the payment method as this, it will enable on checkbox as a maturity date as a mandatory. We'll go and see that. Just we enable bills payables to enable maturity date at the time of payment. That's all. Is selected. Now as a mandatory you have to select the maturity date for this. Cloud INC corporate bills, right? What's wrong with this? It should prompt us maturity date selection. See here, bills payable is set to yes, but it has to ask. How come it is accepted? It should not happen. So that is getting applicable. Bills payable is applicable, but the maturity date, it will make mandatory. So 1 second. How it is accepted in this scenario? create payment. Cloud INC. Payment method is Cloud INC, check bills. If you go to advanced tab, you could notice that field is mandatory. Yes. Maybe some bug it accepted when we tried earlier. See, the field is mandatory. So this check, the payment should be matured by this month end. We may issue check now till month end. The supplier cannot uncash it. That's how just specify the maturity date, and you can just go to invoice selection. Yeah, still it is available. Okay, done. So with this date check will be printed. As a part of period end activity
Lakshman,
closing. Yeah.
Lakshman, the check will be printed the part of current check run, where the check cannot be used until that date, or the check waits until the print
So
off.
when you submit the check in the bank, what date banker will see? The
Yeah,
date
banker will not clear the check. So we will issue the check today, the next pay run check.
No.
We'll
You issue the check. You will be writing the date on the check, right? What is the meaning
Right.
of the date?
Right.
So that
So
will be the date on the
yeah.
check.
In US, I think lately I have observed that if I write checks for my business, even for a future date,
No, can you be a bit loud?
banks are overlooking.
No. I'm sorry. Can you be a bit loud? Or it's a little bit low your voice. Yeah, what you are saying?
So lately, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, now it's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Lately, what I'm observing is when I write a check for my business with a future date, banks are clearing it immediately. Maybe I write for 3 or
Maybe
4 days only.
that could be exceptional case. In case
Yeah.
business that may be accepted, but it's a normal, it's a general process.
I mean, normal practice, right? Yeah. So
Correct.
I issue check today, but doesn't matter. It's a future date check. So bank should not be clearing it.
If you are writing with a future date, if they are clearing that, we should not call it as a PDC again.
Something.
We should
Yeah,
call
broken.
a different name then, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Fine. So this is how just we have the functionality. The same you could see in EBS also. Same setups we do, same process. So the same we have seen this environment also. Fine. That's all about bills payable. So we know like as a part of period closing activity, we'll run that the status process, which will update that account to bills payable to that actual cash account. So that remains same. There is no difference in that. Okay. Done with that.
Sorry, Lakshman, let's briefly talk about the accounting. I'm not familiar with any BS. So when we issue this, in the invoice creation, nothing has changed. With the payment, it would be cash account to the.
Yeah, I'll show you if you are not aware of it. Okay, we'll just look into that. See, I'll just come from invoice. So we created invoice. So this is invoice we created. So we accounted this invoice. So here the account what I think through distribution system is taking, the expense account is debit and here that liability account. Liability account is crediting. Okay, accounts payable account. When you make the payment, what is your normal accounting? Liability account debit, and if you are following the reconciliation, cash clearing would be credited. If you are not going with the reconciliation part, liability account is debit and cash account is credit. But here, this is bills payable payment. System will use that bills payable account for this accounting. We'll just see that. You just directly can search with the cloud INC. I think we didn't submit accounting for this. We'll submit and you can see that. So I think this is the one, right? 8. Go to actions under submit accounting. So in case of normal check, what is the accounting entry? The liability debit, cash clearing or cash, depending on how you are going to process that payment. Now if you look at this, you could see the liability account is debiting. Okay, we cannot say it's a pending for clearing or it's a paid, it's a cleared. So system is taking future dated payment. Once, whenever you arrive the due date, we'll be submitting that future dated process. What the process will do is it will be reversing this future dated and it will be hitting to that cash account. Okay, so here it's crediting. Once you arrive at 30th, we'll be running that future dated payment process. So then system will be debiting this future dated payment. Here it's crediting the same 1000, it will debit and it will credit to cash account. So that's how it will get knocked off and the accounting takes place.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That makes
Thanks. Fine. So we're done with this and just this is a simple concept. We'll look at this pay alone, then we can wind up for today. Hardly it may take 5 minutes time, or else we'll see in tomorrow's session. So okay, we'll just try to spend time just 6 to 7:45 from tomorrow. Today also we did the same, so that we can close as soon as possible. Okay, that's all for today. I just done from my side. If you have any questions, you can stay back. If you don't have any questions, you can be done for today. Thank you all. Have a good day and good night.